Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. Today we're in Deuteronomy, chapter 21, 22, and 23. Tomorrow we're doing 24 through 27. So, let's get started. Right off the bat, they start talking about unsolved mysteries. What do you do if someone's laying in the middle of the field dead, and you don't know who did it? And there's no murderer. There's no way to know who did it. Well, there's a process here that they talk about going to the measure into the nearest town and getting a cow and breaking its neck, and everyone washing their hands over this cow by the nearest running stream. And this, basically, the concept of this was to make sure that God didn't punish Israel for the death of an innocent person. Then we get into fair treatment of captured women. A lot of these themes that we see today in Deuteronomy are just about this right here. It's just about being nice. Just be nice. Just treat people with respect. Just be nice to people, essentially what it boils down to. Now, when it came to the fact of the Israelites would capture areas, capture people, and female prisoners were one of the results of this happening. Now, that was actually shunned in multiple places in the Old Testament where it said that you shouldn't do it. Now, the fact that female prisoners of war would be taken as wives by Israel does not sanction a practice, as we read right here. But the law here was designed to protect women in such a case. She may be considered as an equal, or she must be considered as an equal, actually, permitted to display her humiliation by shaving her head. So she must be permitted to doing this. It's not saying you've got to shave her head and you've got to take all of her clothes off and you've got to trim her nails. No, it says she must be allowed to do this, to shave her head and to trim her nails, and be allowed to mourn for her father and mother who have been killed or have been lost for a full month. Only then could her Israelite captor make full claim on her as his wife and become her husband. Further protection was also added in this case. So in other words, if the man decided, I don't want you no more later on down the road, he had to let her go wherever she wanted to. He couldn't sell her off. He couldn't use her as merchandise. She was not his slave. She had to be treated in a respectful manner. The next is the right of the firstborn. In other words, if you married a woman and you had a baby with this woman, and then you married another woman and you had a baby with her, you couldn't say, well, I don't like this woman over here I married first, and even though I had a son with her, I don't like her, so I'm going to give my firstborn rights to this woman's son instead. You couldn't do that. That first son of yours has those rights, period, even if you don't love the mother. That was the law. Then we get into the rebellious son. Now, I'm going to tell you right here, I am sure that all three of my kids are super excited that I did not follow this rule in the Bible. It says, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father or mother and doesn't listen to them, even after they discipline him, then all the men of the city will stone him to death. You must purge evil from you. I am so certain that my children are glad I have not followed this rule, because I might not have any kids at this point, because being a preacher's kid, they are stubborn. They may take after me in this. That may be my fault. The next is a display of an executed people. You ever heard that? Hang them high in the street for everybody to see. Well, the Bible says let's not do that. If you're going to hang them in the street, you got to take them down and bury them before sundown. Otherwise, God's curse that is on them will spread to people in the town. So don't hang them high in the street. Guys, don't do that. I know it ain't Texas out here. All right, no hanging them high in the street and leaving them for everybody to see. That's not the right thing to do. Just be nice. We get into chapter 22, caring for your brother's property. And it talks about if your brother loses a cow or one of their livestock, to bring it back to them. And if you're not able to bring it back to them, nobody's around, take it to your house, take care of it until they come looking for it to find it, and then give it back to them. It's the nice thing to do. I've actually done that before out in Cookville, been riding down through the back roads and just had to stop because there's a cow in the middle of the street, so I've had to shoo it back to its own property. before and have actually done that. So basically, just take care of other people's stuff, take care of other people, treat other people's stuff like you want your stuff to be treated. Essentially, is what this is boiling down to. Preserving natural distinctions. Here's one for the ages today. That's even relevant today, actually, I believe. It says, a woman is not to wear male clothing, and a man is not to put on a woman's garment, for everyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord your God. Now, for a woman to wear male clothing, and for a man to wear woman's clothing or garments, or like cross-dressing or even transvestitism, it's wrong because, among other things, it violates the principle of separation that God has built into the creation order, the order of things. It's just not natural. This entire section is talking about let those things that are natural just be natural. Okay, go with it. Then we move on to violations of proper sexual conduct. Most of these things are pretty self-explanatory in this section. Chapter 22, verse 10. I'm going to go back. It says, do not plow with an ox and a donkey together. That stuck out to me. And the reason why it stuck out to me, because I was like, well, why wouldn't you want to do that? I mean, if you had an ox, but it wasn't quite pulling the load enough, wouldn't you want to add a donkey to it to give it a little more horsepower, so to speak? But no, that's not what this is about. Because donkeys and oxes, essentially, they didn't get along very well with each other, usually. So to hitch an ox and a donkey up as a team was to invite all kinds of difficulty because of their different natures and their different habits. And actually, we get into the New Testament, 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 through 18. Paul talks about this, and he uses this specific law to illustrate why Christians should not marry outside of their own faith. Not why they shouldn't marry outside of their own race, but interracial marriage was not shunned. It was interreligious marriage. So in other words, marrying someone of a different religious faith than yourself because, well, he has a whole illustration of why you shouldn't do that. The different problems that it will cause in your marriage and how a lot of times they just will not work. So we'll learn about that later on in 2 Corinthians. We move on to chapter 23, and we talk about exclusion and inclusion. Those who were able to go to worship and those who were not. When it says entry to the Lord's assembly here, it's referring to participation in public worship, not membership in the covenant people. You could still be an Israelite. You could still be a child of God. You were just not permitted to go to worship. Now, the Bible here is very light on explanation other than the explanations that they talk about Balaam. So I will leave that to you. If you want to talk about that in the comments and expand on it, feel free to do so if you know any of the reasons why. Let's talk about those. Now, the next thing that pops up is the cleanliness of the camp. And here it is in a nutshell. Bury your poo. Don't be pooping in the street. Don't be pooping in your bed. Don't be peeing and pooping all over the place. Don't be doing that. Go outside of the town. Dig a hole. Take a digging implement. It says right here, dig a hole with it and cover up your excrement. Don't be pooping all over the place. Be clean, people. Be clean. That's pretty self-explanatory, I think. Then it talks about fugitive slaves, and I was surprised about this in little ways. It says, do not return a slave to his master when he has escaped from his master to you. Let him live among you wherever he wants within your city gates. Do not mistreat him. That's interesting. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Then it talks about cult prostitution. That is forbidden. Interest on loans, basically do not charge your brother interest on silver, food, or anything that can earn interest. You may charge a foreigner interest, but not your brother. That basically cutting back on the loan sharks and people taking advantage of your friends when they're at their lowest point. Don't take advantage of people. Again, it comes right back to this right here. Just be nice. Treat people like you want to be treated. Just be nice. Keeping vows, be sure you keep your vows and your neighbor's crops. Now here's your neighbor's crops, verses 24 and 25. A person who crossed through a neighbor's vineyard or a grain field could harvest as much as they could gather or hold in their hands, or as much as they could eat while they were there until they're full. But that's it. To exceed that amount would be taking advantage of your neighbor's generosity, and it would be a form of theft. Now, Jesus and his disciples actually practiced this limited gathering from time to time, and they actually did it on the Sabbath with no criticism whatsoever from the Pharisees, except for the fact that they did it on the Sabbath. And that's in Mark chapter 2, verses 23 through 28, if you'd like to look that up. Now, remember, tomorrow is chapter 24 through 27 in Deuteronomy. I hope you got something out of this today. I sure did. It was an interesting read. And I hope to see you again tomorrow for another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. Be sure to click that like button, that subscribe button, and of course click the little jingle bell so you can get notified the next time I upload a video, which will be tomorrow. We'll see you then.